Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, dust lasers, peasants, vassals, minions. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And today I want to talk about the sanctions. This whole episode over Ukraine with U.S. and Russia in the Eurozone, theoretically trading off sanctions. And one of the reasons why we see these sanctions occurring is because, of course, all the leaders and governments have to posture. They have to posture to each other, and they have to posture for the constituents, the citizens of their respective countries, and all make it look like they're kind of doing something. And it's all for show for the most part. I mean, if they're really serious, they would pretty much cut off everything they could, wouldn't they? But instead we see these targeted sanctions, essentially to annoy the elites of all these different countries involved. And it all comes to naught. And a lot of the stories that come out that I'm going to be talking about certainly substantiate this further. And one of the aspects of this that's important to me is that there seems to be a mantra out there about World War III all the time, and I'm one of those rarities that doesn't think World War III is going to happen. There's too much globalization. There's too much interconnection. And I understand that throughout history, certainly there's been a lot of economic connections between countries, and they even had periods where monarchies were interbred throughout Europe, and we're all family, and this didn't keep wars from happening. And I never want to rule wars out because, as I've said in almost every video, we have sociopaths and psychopaths running most countries in the world, so you can never really totally rule out crazy wars. But let's get into some of these stories that show just how interconnected things are, and just how much a lot of these sanctions are for show and don't really amount to much. And the first one is a story that most people have heard about now. This is from a couple weeks ago, and that's France selling 2 helicopter assault ships to Russia. And this has to do with saving 1,000 French jobs. It's a 1.2 billion euro deal. And I found one of the most interesting aspects of it is Russia's first major foreign arms purchase since the end of the Cold War. So a pretty big deal in that sense. And but anyway, in spite of the sanctions, in spite of the Ukraine, in spite of U.S. Tit for tat, France wants to go ahead with this sale of these 2 assault ships to Russia. So it's problematic in a couple of ways. Of course, there's an economic relationship. But then the fact that France is all selling 2 advanced warships to potentially one of NATO, France, and the United States' enemies. So, and then in June 2014, not only that, 400 Russian naval crews are going to begin training on the ship in France. And so that's an interesting connection there. And then another story we have is about Russian commodities and energy. Business is booming. In spite of all these sanctions, of course, not only is the gas and the energy still flowing, as it has to, because most of Europe gets their information, gets their energy and their oil from Russia. And so anyway, 2% more gas year over year this first quarter. So that's a huge boon for Russia. In spite of the Ukraine actions in Ukraine. And the price increases help fill the gap of any disruption, so we have to remember that. There's been a slight decline because of disruption with Ukraine, but the fact that Ukraine lost their subsidy from the Russians and prices doubled overnight certainly created this surge in money going to Russia for their gas. And the U.S. has stopped short of targeting Russia's biggest companies in energy and commodities. So let's bear that in mind. In spite of all the saber rattling, in spite of all the threats, the U.S. has stopped short of going after Russia's biggest companies. And once again, because of the connection with Europe, so Gazprom and Rosneft cannot be part of this economic war. And also interestingly, as it turns out, a lot of U.S. companies are actually getting hurt by these sanctions more than Russian companies, and Visa, MasterCard being 2 of them. And And then one of the other deals that popped up recently is BP. So now we have British Petroleum, in fact, is going to has confirmed his commitment to Russia after signing a $300 million shale gas deal with the Russia state-owned oil company Rosneft. And this shouldn't come as a surprise, because as it turns out, BP in fact owns 20%, 19.7% stake in the Russian state-owned company Rosneft. So, and then we also have deals, interconnections with Rosneft and ExxonMobil and Shell. They're also setting up new deals with Russia. And Putin even said that, quote, "The challenges in the energy sector are clearly of a global nature, and we can only meet them together by means of cooperation. It is important that this is exactly what the major companies are doing," unquote. And I found that quote very telling, because not only is he talking about the challenges in the energy sector are global nature, I assume he's making a reference to the technology that needs to be distributed, advanced technologies to extract oil and energy that's harder and harder to get at. And of course, this deal with BP is involved with fracking and shale gas. So that's a technology they want to explore more. And that's a new development in Russia, by the way. I also found it telling in that quote that he isn't talking about the cooperation of countries. He's talking about the cooperation of major companies, major corporations, not countries. So that's very telling as well. And one of a string of new deals, BP, ExxonMobil, Shell, we have this French assault ships, all these deals going on all the time. And let's look at Germany alone has 6,200 companies doing business in Russia. And Germany has tried to move away from Russian gas to a certain extent, but they still get 25% of their gas from Russia. And 300,000 German jobs are estimated to depend on exports to Russia. So there's a very symbiotic relationship between the German and the Russian economies, and therefore the states. And in fact, China and Germany are Russia's two largest trading partners. And Russia is Germany's 11th biggest export market and 7th largest import market. So a pretty clear case, certainly the interconnection of Germany and Russia. And if there's a strong connection between Germany and Russia, then we have a strong connection between Russia and Eurozone. So there's not going to be any desire to go to war anytime soon, let alone ramp up any of these sanctions. So to get back to the point of my video, all these sanctions are pretty much just for show and for annoyance and posturing for the base and posturing for the world. And but let's get back to this story. Another good quote that substantiates what I'm driving at is Rosneft boss Igor Sechin, who is sanctioned personally by the U.S., by the way. So they don't sanction the company, but they sanction him personally. And he said, quote, that sanctions don't seem so threatening anymore, unquote, after this new BP deal. And needless to say, another big change in the scenery is this huge deal between China and Russia, this gas deal. And that's a game changer and certainly takes any sting whatsoever out of the sanctions by the U.S., at least maybe not in the short term, but certainly in the long term. But I'm going to do a separate video on that, so I'm not going to talk about that too much right now. So there's a collection of examples of how interconnected in this globalized world, and certainly this connection includes Russia, and so we're not going to have this World War III scenario. And another part of that picture, too, is the U.S. can't push too hard because we already have a world that's moving away from the dollar and the petrodollar, and any serious sanctions could push Russia further in that direction. They're already dumping treasuries, and they could certainly make major moves away from the petrodollar, and that would really backfire on the United States. And another connection I want to make here as well, where Russia and the Eurozone and the United States are playing sanctions mostly for show, is because, once again, a theme that strings through a lot of my videos, these oligarchs have more in common with each other. And so they may play these games in order to filter this propaganda through the media and posture to the masses and posture to each other. But in the end, they're part of the same system. And Russia is no exception. They're part of the cabal of central banks around the world, and they are oligarchs, and they are taking the money out of the country and swirling it away in offshore accounts, just like oligarchs all over the world, and evading taxes. And so they're all part of the same class. It's not certainly not country against country anymore. It's top versus bottom. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.